Today's forum, Poverty in Our Midst, is a part of the June series, Pulling at the Roots or Strings of Poverty, sponsored by National Church Residency and with support from Today with WOSU Public Media. Always important to thank our sponsors, for sure. Our speakers represent a diversity of backgrounds and perspectives on many different aspects of poverty in our community. Nancy Nestor-Baker, Senior Assistant Vice President of Community Engagement at United Way of Central Ohio, will host and moderate the conversation today. Joining her as panelists are Jennifer Combs of United Way, E3 program participant, Eric Drury, Vice President of Strategic Planning at National Church Residencies, Linda Danter, Executive Director of New Directions Career Center, and Philip Cunningham, Program Manager of Workforce Development at the Columbus Urban League. Nancy, the podium is yours. Let's thank our sponsors, National Church Residency and WOSU, and welcome our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Todd. As Todd said, we are talking today about poverty in our midst. We often see data and statistics on poverty, but we may not often have the opportunity to really look beyond those statistics and think about the people who are actually coping with poverty, who live it every day. And today is going to give us an opportunity to do that. We're joined by an exceptional group of panelists today. I am really excited to be able to moderate this panel with them. But before we get into some questions with the panelists, we're going to do an activity. It's called the Making Choices game, and you'll see at your place, you all should have this piece of paper, says Making Choices on it. Now, it's called the Making Choices game, but it's not really a game because there is no winner, and the only competition is between you and the circumstances of life. It's also called the Smarties game, but it's not because you need to be a Smartie to complete it, but because it's played with Smarties candy. And I hope you didn't eat the Smarties candy when you sat down, because now you need it. But you can eat them when we're done with the game, so it's good stuff. All right, so for the next few minutes, I want each one of you to pretend that you are married, you have 2 children, one of the 2 adults in your household works full-time, the other one works part-time at 2 jobs. Both of the adults make minimum wage, and you have a very limited budget. The 15 Smarties in your Smarties roll represents your entire monthly budget. It's Smartie money, if you will. So what you should do is open those up and line those up over here on the right side of your card where it says Candy's Bank. So that's your budget for the month. So you get your Smarties all laid out on your Candy's Bank. This is not the hard part. And now, as you have done that, what you need to do is you need to decide how you want to allocate your budget of Smarties across the categories on your card. You may not skip any rows. So you need to think about what are the choices you will make about housing, about transportation, healthcare, food, all of those categories on there. So study those choices in each row. Decide whether you want to invest 1, 2, or 3 Smarties, depending on what's most important to you. And put your Smarties on your card now. So as you look at what you're budgeting or what you have budgeted, how many of you put 3 Smarties in housing? How many of you put 3 Smarties in food? How many of you put 3 Smarties in transportation? Healthcare. So you can see there is a diversity of opinion about where those Smarties should be budgeted, what your allocations ought to be like. Now, you have your Smarties allocated, but there's been a change in your family circumstances. One of your children has a badly infected tooth and absolutely has to see the dentist. You don't have dental insurance. You must give up 2 candies of your budget to pay for that dental care. So take off 2 candies and adjust your budget as needed. It just got harder, yes. All right, so you made that choice. But there's been another change in your family's life. Your spouse was just laid off. No severance pay. You need to remove 4 candies to adjust to this. How many of you have 2 Smarties left in housing? How many of you have 2 Smarties left in transportation? How many of you have 2 Smarties left in food? What about health care? You see, you made the choices. They are hard choices, and we all tend to make those choices a bit differently. So the moral of the story, and you may eat your Smarties now if you like, but the moral of the story, or the moral of the game, if you will, is that hardworking people in our community have to make these kind of choices every day. And it is flat out hard. But there are some resources available. There are some people who know about the hard choices and who can help. And that brings us to our panel discussion. So today we're going to take a personal view of poverty, what it means to live in poverty and what it takes to help people find pathways out of poverty. So let's meet our panelists. Jennifer Combs is a graduate of United Way of Central Ohio's E3 program. And the E3 program was created by the Women's Leadership Council to help low to moderate income working women in Central Ohio become, you're all here, what are the 3 E's? Educate, empower, elevate. Yes, we have a lot of E3 supporters here. The idea is to move to a new level of financial stability for themselves and for their families. Jennifer is currently a student at Columbus State, and she hopes to go into community leadership because she has developed a very strong desire to help people and to make changes that include economically disadvantaged individuals. Phil Cunningham is a fiscal program manager at the Columbus Urban League, and he builds programs that help people get jobs, people who have multiple barriers to employment. Philip really knows his stuff. In addition to his professional and his academic background, he knows poverty inside and out. He understands the issues that he seeks to solve and the people that he works so hard to help. Linda Danter is the executive director of New Directions Career Center. She is also deeply involved in United Way's E3 program. The New Directions mission is to empower women in transition to achieve and maintain economic self-sufficiency. If you take a look at their website, you'll see that they empower individuals to transform their own lives. Erica Drury is Vice President of Strategic Planning for the Home and Community Services Division of National Church Residences. And the vision of National Church Residences is to continually improve communities by transforming the way seniors and vulnerable populations live and thrive. Erica, who has extensive experience in adult day services, oversees service coordination and care coordination in housing, and is responsible for helping residents age in place in their homes. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to start with a question for Linda. Linda, you work very closely with women who are struggling to get ahead. What are some of the key challenges that they face?
Thank you, Nancy. I think some of the challenges that women face is just feeling overwhelmed by everything that they have to juggle in their lives. Trying to go back to school, working a job, taking care of their children. It's an overwhelming kind of situation, and trying to find the social services, just like we did here in the Smarties game. That takes so much of their time, trying to figure out how they're going to pay the bills, making tough decisions about whether I buy groceries or pay my medical bill. Those kinds of choices are very difficult, especially when you have children involved. no car, no health insurance, no housing, no job. Those are some of the kinds of things that women face, and men as well, but since we serve women, obviously I'm speaking to that. I think something else that sometimes we forget about are the feelings that people have as a result of this. I did a little quick survey of some of the women in our one of our programs, which is was helpful to me to get some comments to share with you. And the thing that came out often was that they have feelings of shame and embarrassment and feeling like as an adult that they're a failure, especially if they have to move back home with their mother or their families, and it's a very difficult situation.
Jennifer, let's move to you. You've worked very closely with Linda. You've worked very closely with New Directions and with the E3 program. You're now in college, doing well at Columbus State. What are some things that you want us to understand about your experiences in getting to this point in your life?
That's a really good question. For me, I would like for people to know that going back to school as an adult has been a huge challenge. I did not go to college after high school. I went straight to work, was married, had a child, and then my husband died, and so I spent my time raising my daughter, essentially, and everything went into that focus. So I didn't concern myself with what might happen if I ever got to go to school, because I didn't get to ever think about that. I had a career in construction, and as I became not able to do that physically anymore, then my choices became more limited, and the more limited that I was, the more I thought about, I need to do something here, and something's got to change. I didn't want to be one of those ladies on the street, pushing around a shopping cart with all my belongings in it. And so I decided I had to find help somewhere, and that's where I came into New Directions. And I think people need to know that there's programs out there like that who are willing to help and that need funding, more funding. There's so many things that they do for the women like me out there, and there's so much more they could do with more funding. It's just amazing the changes in my life and my peer groups' lives as well that happens as a result of people being willing to donate money. But I think there's a real great need for people in the general community to know that these programs exist and to know that that's an opportunity for them to give. I'm not sure if that answered that or not, but
That's just fine. Let's move to Philip. Now, Philip, your work focuses on programs for people who have multiple employment issues. What are these issues? What kind of issues are we talking about? What gets in the way of finding and keeping a job?
Okay. Well, we touched on them a little bit, but specifically there are 3 or 4 issues that we look at every single time a person comes into the Columbus Urban League. The first being education. Lots of times people come into our office and they don't have a GED, or they may have dropped out of school in the 6th grade and have been working their entire career. Or if a person doesn't have a vehicle, and lots of times we think about this, is that so you have an opportunity to get a job, but then you don't have enough money to get to your job once you get a job. And if you don't have a vehicle or you don't have a bus pass, you can't make it to work. Another thing is that lots of people that come into our office have drug addiction issues, and that's usually a product of the mentality that they have, because it's tough to be able to live a life in poverty and then not be able to self-medicate. There are other things that go on, but the biggest thing that I think that we deal with at the Columbus Urban League is the mindset of the individuals that walk into our office. Lots of people that come into our office, they just feel as if they've been thrown away by the world. And so our job is to allow them to look at themselves in a different way, so it changes the way that they look at the world. And when we do that, there's something that we call the magic at the Urban League. So when you walk in, and actually, I can dig in a little bit. So I'm excited about the Urban League's work. So today was the first day of our New Beginnings course. And the first day, when you come into the Urban League, I look into everyone's eyes and I ask them, are they ready for a new beginning? Because this is their opportunity to change the way that their life is currently. But I can't do that unless you're willing to change. And so I look into each person's eyes and I have a conversation with them and I ask them, if you're ready to look at yourself differently, this will change your life. And so I think maybe the biggest thing is just the mindset, the mentality, the way that we look at ourselves is the biggest barrier to poverty or being an issue in poverty as a whole.
Thank you. Erica, we have an aging population in our country. We have an aging population here. And that can present some challenges that are perhaps different than challenges that we ordinarily think of when we think of individuals living in poverty. What do you see as the challenges that are faced by senior citizens who live in poverty, and how might those challenges be different than the challenges of poverty for younger adults?
I think probably a central difference has a lot to do with their healthcare needs and healthcare needs that arise as you age. Clearly similar to the Smarties game, and you may have heard before, it isn't unusual for a senior who's living in poverty or near poverty to truly have to make a decision as to whether they're going to purchase their medication or they're going to buy food. It's not unusual for them to take half of a dose of medication or, as opposed to the whole. It's not unusual to have it for half the month but not the rest. Deciding whether they're going to have their lights on or be able to eat. Those decisions happen as they happen for families. But when healthcare becomes involved, obviously there's grave consequences if folks aren't able to take their medicine. And I think it also has to do with the stress that someone else mentioned about living a life in poverty every month, trying to figure out how to make your Smarties work. There's certain stressors or amount of stress that I think we can handle as we're younger, but as we age, that also has different consequences. So I think to me, in the work that we see, that's a real central difference.
Nancy, can I make one comment?
Absolutely.
I noticed one thing that was missing from the Smarties game is childcare, and that is a major challenge for women, and that often sidetracks them from being able to pursue any additional education or even to hold a job, because sometimes employers aren't understanding if you miss too much work, which from an employer standpoint, you understand. But I think that is something else that's just a huge challenge. And I would like to say that we provide transportation and child care assistance for the women to participate in the programs that we offer at New Directions Career Center for that very reason, because we know those are two of the biggest barriers to women being able to receive additional education and training. And
if I may add, the issue of elder care now is also an issue that folks are facing.
Yes.
If they they don't have the means for child care, they rarely have the means to potentially help care for an older adult that's also in their lives and often in their homes, as we were talking, because that generational income is kind of important to keeping some of the homes afloat.
it is.
Yeah, Linda, I'd like to add that too. I had actually started to go to college in 1994, and when my daughter was in 6th grade, and I went for a year, and it just came down to the point of being able to afford raising my daughter and going to school or going back to work, and I chose going back to work because that's, at that time, I had no other options. I didn't have a support group behind me.
Right. And we see that a lot with the women who go into various educational programs, E3 and otherwise, that of the women who go into the E3 program, the majority of them have tried to go to college before, but they have not been successful for a variety of reasons, and often it is because they didn't have child care, because they had health issues, they may not have been able to have enough money and a support system. That's the other thing we find, and that gets back to what you were saying, Phil. I think that one of the biggest things we always say that we do for our women is to help them build their confidence, because they come in beaten down. They have had so many issues they're trying to deal with, and I think helping them to develop that confidence, to believe, they have to have somebody believe in them before they can believe in themselves, and that's can often sidetrack people early on from being able to be successful if they don't have it.
Mm-hmm. The issues that you heard from each of the panelists really echo a lot of the things that came out in the poverty simulation this morning. Those of you who are here who were part of the poverty simulation will recognize a number of those. Transportation, child care, health care, the sheer stressors that go along with living in poverty, and the unrelenting need to worry about the next day. Yes.
So when we first started the Smarties game, Erica asked me, well, can I borrow one of your Smarties? And so that is the reality of what poverty is. Lots of times we find ourselves in situations when we do not have enough, we go and we borrow money, and that puts us even further behind. And I think that's the reality of the situation at this point, and that causes a lot more stress as you move
Yes,
forward.
It does, and a lot of the women who come to us at the center, they not only have they tried to go to college, but often they have not had the they don't have a sound background sometimes with math and English in particular, and so they end up getting student loans, and they spend those dollars on developmental classes that do not count toward a degree or certificate program. They build up a huge loan that they're responsible for, which, by the way, even if they have to declare bankruptcy later on, that's still there. That piece doesn't get moved away. So they end up with this huge debt, and sometimes they get discouraged. They have a crisis, just like in the Smarties game here, where they have an unexpected expense. Something happens, they can't go back to school, they get discouraged, and then they have this huge loan that's hanging over them. They often default on it, and then they can't go back at a later point in time without addressing that. It just snowballs. Absolutely. It becomes a really hard to overcome. And I think, it would be difficult for any of us to have that kind of debt hanging over us without really anything to show for it.
So I'm not going to ask individual panel members these questions. The next questions I'll ask are for all of them to answer at will. And you've already picked up on the idea that these guys talk amongst themselves and are quite able to carry on the conversation. I could just sit down, I'd be fine. What do you see as some of the biggest myths that people hold about people who are in poverty?
That they're lazy.
Yes. I think that they're lazy, that they don't care, that they're not motivated. Those kinds of things we see frequently.
I was in Asheville, North Carolina at a couple of our properties, and there was a woman who was speaking at an event, and she lived in our affordable housing property, and one of the things she mentioned is that she feels that people assume that folks who are in poverty aren't intelligent, and she kept referencing, she had been interviewed on the TV, and they kept remarking on a word she had used, sort of a big word, and she's like, they must think that I'm not intelligent because I'm poor.
So that's interesting. And I guess, so Nancy, you said something to me about knowing poverty inside and out. And I'll go a little bit into my personal story. When I first moved to Columbus, I had my MBA. And one of the myths of poverty is that people in poverty are not smart. When I first moved here, it took me maybe 9 to 10 months to find a job. I had an MBA, I had experience, I had talent, I had the will to work. I just didn't have an opportunity. And I found myself in transitional poverty. I worked as a janitor where I couldn't afford to pay to get gas for my car to drive back and forth to my job. But if I didn't go to work, I didn't have enough gas to do anything. So I couldn't go on interviews. It's almost like it puts you in a cycle where you can't really get ahead. And there are tons and tons of myths about people that are in poverty. And part of it is that we almost treat poverty as if it's a disease. And then there's us, and then there's them. There are those of us who are good, and there's those of them who are not. And I think that probably we need to change the conversation around poverty as a whole, because lots of times we say, how can we go help them? But they are part of our actual community. And so how do we help us by helping people in poverty?
Yes. And if I might add, Phil, I'm again, back to the little survey I did with some of our clients, I think your point is well taken. One of the clients who was sharing her thoughts with me said, she wants people to know that being poor can happen to anyone. She said, quote, "My second year of working as a teacher," this is an educated woman, "I had to file for bankruptcy. Debt had accumulated after my marriage ended in separation and then divorce. I'm working very hard to get back on track, and I'm embarrassed that it happened to me."
It is an embarrassing situation when you find yourself as an adult especially after working. I had a fairly decent career in construction. I made fairly decent money, and so the older you get, the less you can do. It just seems, and it is a cycle. You get into this cycle where if you can't afford to pay this, then you can't do that, and then that becomes a barrier to other things. And then if, God forbid, if something happens and goes wrong, and then you're really, up a creek. So it's difficult to be in that situation and to have others feel like others are looking at you like, well, why aren't you doing this, or why aren't you doing that?
And
So.
that's a great point, because I think some people, I mean, I come from a poverty background, and I'm sure probably a lot of people in this room do as well. And I think sometimes I've heard people say or make comments or imply, well, I did, I did this, so you should be able to do that too. It's like that. You don't know everybody's circumstances, and everyone's circumstances are different. And yes, I come from a poverty background, but I had a great support system. My parents never said to me, if you go to college. It was always when you go to college. There was that expectation there from the beginning, and there was always that love and support. And not everybody has that, and that's just one example. We all have different situations, and we can't judge other people's circumstances based on what's happened to us.
Well, as you think about the work that you do and the work that you're engaged in, and as you think about how we in Central Ohio go about building pathways out of poverty, what do you think are Central Ohio's greatest strengths?
I'll jump in there. Never at a loss for words. I think one thing is that Columbus and Franklin County is a very caring community. I really do. I mean, I've lived in a few different places, and I think that we have that going for us, that people are very good at coming together to try to solve problems. I think we're very generous in terms of our giving. I think that's a real plus for us.
When it comes to aging, Central Ohio is very fortunate to have a very strong aging support network. From our Franklin County Office on Aging to our Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. A lot of the work that those programs are doing are, certainly supporting folks who are in poverty, but they're also helping folks stop from dropping, further into the poverty area. So, that sort of support network for people who are kind of teetering on the edge is really critical. And seniors in Central Ohio are lucky to have that. That I think creates a strong foundation.
I guess for myself, I think that Columbus and the surrounding communities do a very good job of trying to help others in the community and be involved in the different areas, volunteer opportunities. I myself, I like to volunteer as well, as much as I can, when I can. I think that there's a great need, though, for more of those opportunities for people who would like to be involved with them, in terms of maybe more transportation, more. I think transportation is a real big one, because I'm driving a 17-year-old truck right now, and I pray that it stays together every day. So, but in transportation, making sure that people can get where they need to go when they need to go, and also housing. I think housing is pretty critical to that.
I think that people care. I've been here in Columbus for 3 years, and I've been in different parts of the country, and I noticed that the people of Columbus, the smart people that have the ability to solve problems, care about the problems enough to invest in solving it. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I have the answers to end poverty today, but I know that there are enough people in this room and then outside around in Columbus that can help me solve this issue. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that Columbus has in its favor, is that the people care enough to spend the time and the effort and the energy to end poverty here. Secondly, we put our money where our mouth is. We invest consistently in different programs throughout the city of Columbus that try to fight poverty. Lots of times people say, well, why don't you just do this? But sometimes doing that takes money. The city, the county, like the city of Columbus focuses on the issues that exist, and then they put their money where their mouth is when it comes to actually going out and paying for those programs. So I applaud you all for doing that, and then also just making sure that the new problems that exist, we continue to do that.
And I'm sure you expect me now to ask the flip side. And Jennifer, you addressed that slightly, but we've talked about what some of our greatest strengths are. What, very quickly, are our greatest challenges?
I think when it comes to seniors, one of the greatest challenges is just for them to be seen, for people to be willing to pay attention to the senior population. You know, it can be very hard to get attention to the issues that they're facing. They're sort of slightly forgotten, or maybe we don't realize that they have the needs they have. So, you know, I think I would say a challenge for those of us that work in the aging field is just getting folks to maybe want to think about it. I mean, as a society, we don't like to think about aging very much, and if we think about it, we think, you know, we're going to age well and be on the golf course, and unfortunately for the majority of people, that's not exactly how life plays out, and, you know, just paying a little bit of attention would be really critical.
I agree with that. I've seen this a lot lately, with especially, I'm not sure why, with some elderly people who obviously look like they needed some help in some area, and to watch people just kind of like walk around and pretend like they don't see it. And I think that happens with us a lot, not because we're callous or something, but because we think we can't make a difference, I think, more than anything. So it's part of the problem and the challenges I see is, along with what you've said, is that people need to be able to see what's going on. There needs to be more of a voice that's willing to go out and say, this is what we need. It needs to be a community effort in all the communities around.
I would say, you know, any opportunity you have to maybe volunteer or be involved, I mean, those of you that participate in the poverty simulation, that's fantastic. If you have a chance to get involved in programs that might actually have you interacting with people whose lives are affected by poverty, especially if you have a chance to go into people's homes, you know, I am very blessed to be a social worker because it has allowed me that opportunity to see a life that I might not have otherwise had an opportunity to see, and the knowledge that comes with that and how it informs how I make decisions. I can't listen to a political debate about Social Security without thinking about all the seniors I've worked with, that's their only source of income, and if something changed about that, you know, thinking about what would happen. They're not abstract concepts. These are real people.
I think having that ongoing support, it kind of comes back to that as well. And that's one thing that a lot of the women who've gone through the E3 program mention, how important the mentoring component of that program is and how that really helps them to get an additional support that they need. I know in some of our other programs we have support groups that meet, and just to provide some continuity, and so that when you finish a class or a program, it's not over. You don't just say, well, here you go, but that they know that there's still people who care about them and are willing to help them on that career journey until they reach their goal.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I think that is a major issue, I have two. One is transportation. I think lots of times we will brush over the fact that CODA is a great system, but when you're in poverty and you're going for your first or an entry-level position, lots of times you can't catch the bus to your job because it's either off the bus line or it's too early when you have to get to work to catch the bus to get there. So that's a huge issue. I don't know how we solve it, but that's one huge issue here in Columbus. I think second is the real opportunity for people to get into the workforce and then have those supportive services that the employer understands. Sometimes when you get your first job, the first 90 days are extremely important. And if you miss a day, you're pretty much fired. And so I think that we need real conversation to happen between the employers and then the agencies that support the services of the individuals that are in poverty, so that there can be a real conversation of who you're actually hiring and what are their current barriers, so that they can create an environment so that this person can stay on the job. Because if childcare is an issue for you when you go to work, you will skip your job to help your child. I mean, that's a fact. People do that. And so if we are able to create the conversation between the for-profit and the nonprofit and those individuals that are in poverty to create supportive services that help people, I think that's probably one of the biggest things.
I thought of another one which is critical, and that is financial literacy and financial education. And I think some of our clients have mentioned that needs to occur earlier in life and have more of an emphasis with young girls to help them to learn how to become financially independent. Obviously, it's true for guys as well. But I think that's it doesn't matter how great a job somebody finds. If they don't know how to manage their money, they'll be living on the edge for the rest of their lives. So that's a critical piece, and we incorporate financial education into every program that we deliver. That's a strong component because it is critical to ultimate, being able to live a decent life, I guess.
It is. It is about time for questions from you. And I will ask one more question of our panelists here as you get your questions together and as you move to the microphone so that you can ask the question that you would like to ask of the panelists. And please, if you were part of the poverty simulation and there's something that comes to mind that you would like to address in the context of that, please ask that question. If you have other questions that you weren't part of the poverty simulation, please do come and ask your questions. And as people think about what questions they might want to ask and move to the microphone, I'm just going to ask you, what if you could do one thing, or not if you, if we could do just one thing, if you had to just pick one, for people in poverty to make it better, to help create those pathways out of poverty, women, children, men, young, old, what would you do? What would make the most difference? It's a hard question.
I think our communities could be more diverse with each other. I think that that people should be more mixed. The communities should include the haves and the have-nots, just for lack of a better way of saying that. But if we're all mixed, then each of us knows that other person, that other side of the story. If you never mix, you don't know those things. So it's hard to address them if you don't know them.
So I did some research before I got up here, and Columbus is an interesting place because it's almost as if it's a tale of two cities. So I work in 43203, that zip code. And in that zip code, 50% of the individuals that live in that zip code live in poverty. That's 4,000 people. And that is 250% below the poverty line. That doesn't include the individuals who are at 100% or 150%, which could go up to 60 to 75%. But I also did research about education. 89.3% of the people that live in that same zip code have high school diplomas. So it's almost as if we need to have conversations, not even just conversations, but real bridge building between all of the different sectors of Columbus in order for there to be real change. I think I was blessed because I had exposure early in life, and education helped me do that. But I think there needs to be more exposure between all of us and individuals in poverty. Poverty is not a disease. Poverty is not something that you can catch. Poverty is just your current situation. It's how much money you make. So if there's a way for us to be able to create more synergies between the parts of the city and the diversity in the city, whether that's black, white, poor, rich, I think that would make a huge difference here.
Well, it probably wouldn't surprise you that working for National Church residents, I'm going to say we need affordable housing. People of all ages need affordable, safe, secure housing. And affordable housing is very much under threat due to, in some cases, tax reform or just lack of funding. And, with our homeless projects where we have permanent supportive housing here in Columbus and elsewhere, I mean, we know that we can't really address any of the issues folks are facing until we can have them housed, until they've got a place to live that's safe and secure. And, for our seniors, some of this research I did, 59% of seniors who rent have to spend at least 30% of their income on their rent each month. And as you can tell from the Smarties game, that doesn't leave much else. So we need a place for folks to live. It's estimated that we're going to the homelessness for seniors will increase by 100% by 2050. So we need to think about how we can afford to build affordable housing and then support people in their rentals.
And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't speak on behalf of the thing I hear most from our clients is that they would really like to see education be easier to access getting more education. And that encompasses a whole variety of things, including child care and more access to or better loans and scholarships and student loan reform and things like that, as well as transportation to be able to get back and forth and the whole support system.
It is time for questions. And it is, of course, CMC's tradition to take audience questions. And we thank you in advance for avoiding editorial comments. So please go to the microphone, as Todd is standing right there by the microphone, and state your name and ask your question.
Todd Tooney, Columbus Metropolitan Club. So first want to just thank the panel and you, Nancy, for being here today to continue to bring this issue up. And I also want to thank United Way, because I know the great work that you're doing in this space around poverty. I think the two things that struck me today is one, how important this issue is, but also how we still seem to kind of talk around it. And so the question I guess one of the questions I have here is really what's the real issue, right? You mentioned, Philip, you started to kind of approach it, which is that there's in 43203, there's about 50% under the poverty, right? 250%. Like, but what does that issue really look like in Columbus? And I don't know if you have the answer, but I just think it's important to continue to share those numbers, because I think that's where you really get to see the magnitude of what the problem is in our community. The other thing that you mentioned, Philip, and I'll bring this out for you again, is that you talked about working with you, right, to solve the problem of poverty. And I think often we talk about this as a unsolvable problem, right? And so I guess I'm interested in hearing you talk a little bit more about why you think it is solvable, and not that you have to have the answer, because I know you don't, but just kind of what makes you believe that it is truly a solvable issue, and whether or not the rest of the panel believes in that as well.
Did you want to?
Who wants to jump in?
Go ahead.
All right.
Okay,
So I do think that poverty is solvable. And maybe it's just because I'm an optimist. That's a tough one. Okay. So here in Columbus, it's open. It's a very open place. And I like that. And I think that we've solved lots of the issues that Columbus has from an infrastructure level. And so I think it's solvable because we will work together first. And then I think it's solvable because if you win, then I win. Does that make sense? So I'm trained as an MBA, right? So I kind of like an economist. And I would like to say that if businesses hire people that are in poverty and they create an infrastructure for people in poverty to keep their job and then also move up the ranks, it would change the way that poverty is looked at in this city, and then also change the income for people in the city so they'd move out of poverty. So I think that's one way where it can start. It is the business to nonprofit, building the bridge between the two. I think that's why it's solvable. Because we have enough big businesses here that can hire people, and we have enough talented people here that could go to work, that are willing to go to work, to be able to solve the problem as a whole.
I guess I'm optimistic. I'm not sure it'll ever be eradicated, but I know from our almost 35-year history at New Directions Career Center that we have about 75% of the women who go through our core programming are able to, within a 1-year period of time, either give up all or part of their public assistance, and they are able to get on a career path that ultimately it pays. Every year our numbers always show that the women who have gone through our programs earn much more than minimum wage, and they I think just showing that, I guess, having those numbers to support the work that we've done to show that women are able to find that 75% of them do either go on for additional higher education or training or are able to become employed. Right now it's about 4 months before is about the average length of time that the women are taking to get to that point. And the average wage right now is about $13 an hour after they complete our program. Now, some of those women are taking jobs, just jobs for right now. It's not their career goal, so they're still working toward that so that they hopefully will earn what is considered a livable wage for themselves and their families, and $13 an hour is usually not it. But I think that those kinds of results over a long period of time gives me hope that there's certainly, we know that there are opportunities to reduce that number significantly.
I think I'm a realistic optimist, but I will say I don't think we can really solve the problem until we stop thinking about it as an us and them issue.
Next question.
Which leads into my next question. I'm Jane Scott. This morning at the poverty simulation, somebody brought up the idea that when you live in a rural community, people are much more mixed. And I know growing up in a farm community, my mom and dad just automatically helped neighbors, and my mother sort of adopted a woman who'd lost her husband and so forth. Is there a program in Columbus? We have Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We have mentors for children. Is there a program in Columbus where a family, say, where we live in Clintonville, could adopt another family and sort of take them under their wings and build a relationship with them, even though they might not be physical neighbors, but to establish a relationship where they kind of take care of them or adopt them personally?
Not that I know of where you could adopt a whole family. You know, obviously you mentioned mentorship programs, Big Sisters, Big Brothers. I see a lot of people continue those relationships as someone, you know, even is older, and those relationships continue. You know, and I think that it's a great concept. And what I would just share is that, you know, those type of programs would need to be built with the concept of, you know, how do you really, what does it mean to really help someone who might be living in poverty? I mean, it's not just about giving them something they need. It's about helping them change a mindset. It's about helping them see themselves as a valued part of our community, and then really building roads that will let them, you know, leave that behind.
I'd like to add something to that. That was interesting that you would say that. The thing that I like the most about New Directions Career Center and the WLC is that their program, the E3 program, and all their other programs are based not on throwing money at you, but on teaching you skills to go out there and acquire the things that you need for yourself. And but they don't just like throw you out there. They're there to support. They're there to support you. I can't tell you how many times I've called crying, you know, I can't do this, and you know, somebody's always there. Somebody is always there to back me up and to put me back on the right path, and you know, we just get started again, and it's been a wonderful experience, and I don't think that people really learn by just having things thrown at them. I really don't.
And I think that gets back to one of the things that sometimes people resent is that I think occasionally we'll have a client who is upset because somebody thinks that someone has approached them and thinks that they can save them, you know, I mean, by giving them things or doing, you know, and that can be offensive. And as Jennifer said, the thing that we really need to be giving our clients are the tools and the education they need to empower themselves to change their lives and to be able to reach whatever goals they have.
So that is an excellent idea. I do believe that we need to create some program that focuses on family to family, because there are certain things that a family can teach another family that cannot be taught at a professional level. I think there may be even budgeting things that might be able to happen between families. So that's an excellent idea. I'm actually going to take that back home to my boss.
It is a good idea.
It's on record that you get credit.
But in addition to that, the Columbus Urban League's New Beginning program, we have a mentoring component involved in all of the teaching that we do. One of the things is that I reach out to my personal network of African American males to come in and teach classes to other African American males. Because there's something to be said about seeing someone that looks like you say that you can do it. And so I consistently reach out to my group. Oh my gosh, sometimes they get so upset with me for calling them last minute. Sometimes I call them. But I want to make sure that people are exposed to the possibilities. And Jane, I'm definitely taking that. I'm taking that one home. Mm-hmm.
We'll take one more question with fairly brief answers.
Very brief statement, actually. My name is Veronica Banu. I started my career in social services as a social worker. I'm now a tax attorney, and so I'm speaking to one of Philip's comments. One of the issues that I see in the Columbus community, I think we are very generous, and I think that we have government and business and nonprofit all working together. But because I've been on both sides, I think the barrier can be that we don't speak the same language, and we need to recognize that we don't. So when you're talking about a program where employers can hire people who are impoverished, when you're talking to a business person, you say, there is a work opportunities tax credit. And so there's a bottom line benefit for you. Absolutely. And if you enter into that with that kind of mindset, we're suddenly on the same page. So I would really implore our nonprofit organizations to have a person on staff who speaks that business language so that you can get that trigger point. And the business people understand you, because business helping is about more than just writing a check. Absolutely. A lot of times, if they understand, if you hire these people, it will impact your bottom line. You're going to get a lot more benefit and leverage out of that. So I just wanted to make sure that we keep in mind that we need to sort of have language so that we're all talking about the same thing. And thanks to the panel, really great comments.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That concludes the questions.
Once again, we want to thank our sponsors for here today, National Church Residency and WOSU. I'd also like to thank our panelists. Thank you for being here today. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please go out over coffee and cookies in our lobby. And thank you all again for being here. Take care.